Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where you can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 139 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on how can dementia relate to clinical behaviour. So on the podcast, we're continuing a really great look at forensic psychology and how it impacts different things. But today we're going to look at how forensic psychology and dementia science interact. And I bet you that you never thought that was actually possible. But it turns out that dementia can actually cause a criminal behaviour. So this is just going to be such a brilliant podcast episode that I really am looking forward to. And you're going to love it. And today is Friday, the 18th of March 2022 as I record this. So we're moving on to the psychology news section. We're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest. And the first one I do have to laugh at, or at least smile at. We try to avoid people with these stereotypically boring traits. Picture a boring person in your mind. What are they like? If you're imagining someone who loves watching TV, has no sense of humour, and works in finance, your stereotype of a boring person is similar to those described in a recent study in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin. But whether or not these kinds of stereotypes are accurate, the researchers behind the paper find that they have damaging social implications. People will have a low opinion of those with a boring trait and will try to actively avoid them. So to be honest, those stereotypes are actually, well, not so much true, but they're rather accurate, because of course, when I think of finance, because I've actually been doing some recently, I would not want to do it for a job. I would not want to do it as a career, and I really admire the people who actually want to do it. And to be honest, even psychology statistics, I've been getting more into that recently because of different bits and pieces. To be honest, it's one of those sort of necessary evils in that, psychology. But all in all, boring people, we all want to avoid them. But of course, because this is all based on stereotypes, it's always good to challenge it. So just bear in mind. So the second one is, a mother's early life experiences of adversity can influence her baby's sensitivity to stress. Over the past few decades, it's become clear that experiences even before birth influence later psychological well-being. A mother's stress levels during pregnancy have emerged as a key influence. Greater stress seems to be programmed her child to expect a difficult environment, and so to be more sensitive to potential threats, and more vulnerable to developing an anxiety disorder. It's uncertain, though, whether adverse earlier in life affects stress levels during a pregnancy, and so might impact a child's sensitivity to stress. So, Cassandra Exheldra at New York University and her colleagues set out to investigate. So I'm not actually going into but the very important thing to actually mention here. Well, if you or someone who you know is pregnant, but I think the best advice here is just don't stress them out and just try and be courteous. So the final one is the editor's pick: insight into our own self-insights. This whole week we looked at the mistakes we make when thinking about what our physical bodies look like. But back in 2020, we examined the way how we see ourselves psychologically, and it seems that when it comes to this kind of self-insight, we are also prone to a number of errors. So let's have a look at these. Right, and I'm just going to look at a few. I feel like I'm smarter than other people. To be honest, yes, tons of people do feel like that. And to be honest, some situations I sort of feel like that. Other situations I don't. Or to be honest, most of the time, I just sort of because I very firmly believe that I know stuff that other members of my family don't, but then they know stuff and they're experts in other areas. So it all sort of averages each other out. But we tend to do this just to make ourselves feel better and increase our self-esteem. So another one is, okay, but at least I know the limits of my knowledge. Oh, and this one I'm actually going to read a bit more. During Kanga effect, I probably butchered that, I do apologise, relates specifically to the tendency of people who are poor at a task to overestimate their ability at it. And there are tons of other really interesting little errors. Some I might actually look at that in a future podcast episode. But if you wanted to learn more, then just go to digest.bps.org.uk, right, and search for the article there. So I hope you enjoy the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. So because I'm about to record a little in between episode for you, which is very personal. So that will be coming out on a Thursday on on the Russian-Ukrainian war. I'm actually going to skip today's personal update because there's not a lot to say any way, and there'll be plenty of my own thoughts and feelings in Thursdays in between episodes. But I really did enjoy doing that. So as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment on show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast, and you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley. I always love to hear from all of you, because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And this episode has been sponsored by Forensic Psychology Collection. So this is an absolutely brilliant free book collection, which will really help you get a really in-depth understanding of forensic psychology. For example, it includes my original book, Forensic Psychology, which gives you a really firm basic understanding of forensic psychology and all of the different areas. For example, the theories of offending, sex offending, imprisonment, and plenty of other areas. That book I really do recommend. Then it also goes into criminal profiling, which is just absolutely brilliant. And that book is one of my best-selling ones. In fact, it always sells tons of copies every single day. So definitely check it out, because that book tells you what criminal profiling actually is and why it isn't actually that good. Then it goes into another type of profiling, which might actually be a lot more helpful. And then finally, it includes the forensic psychology of theft, burglary, and property crime. That book is absolutely brilliant if you want to learn about theft, arson, and basically any property crime. But that is such a brilliant book that I cannot recommend enough. So that is a Forensic Psychology collection, available from all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback and hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore, or your local library if you request it. And if you didn't want to buy a book, but you wanted to still give the podcast a bit one-time support, then please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So, let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So, we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So, we're going to be talking about how can a dementia relate to criminal behaviour. And this is such a good podcast episode, I actually just want to dive into it. As a society as a whole, we are never too surprised when a criminal that has committed crimes before gets in trouble. But when a 60-year-old model citizen commits a crime, even if it is only vaguely illegal, we become a lot more shocked, and we really want to know what happened. And it turns out dementia can be one such explanation. Since Journal and all 2015, sorry, I probably butchered that name, conducted a study that suggested that new late-onset criminal behaviour could reflect an underlying dementia. And as we've mentioned before, dementia is an umbrella term for a wide range of conditions. Also, rather interestingly, the different crimes that are committed actually differ with each type of dementia. This particular study involved a retrospective record review of patients that was seen at the University of California between 1999 and 2013. That revealed that had the 545 people with Alzheimer's disease examined, only 8% of them got into any legal trouble, and they only tended to get into legal trouble when the dementia symptoms were well established. For example, people with a dementia could drive the wrong way on a motorway, or they could wander onto private property, also known as trespassing, due to they're confused, as well as dementia sufferers could walk out of a store without realising that they hadn't paid for such an item. Therefore, these so-called crimes are very understandable when we find out that the person has dementia. On the other hand, there are other criminal behaviours that don't occur in Alzheimer's disease. For example, socially inappropriate actions like sexual harassment and public urination. These are types of behaviours are common in another type of dementia, which we haven't looked at yet on the podcast, called behavioural variant frontotemporal dementia, also known as BVFTD. Therefore, Lingua and 2015 reported that out of 171 people with behavioural variant frontotemporal dementia they examined, 37% of them got into legal trouble with these socially inappropriate behaviours. What is that sort of dementia? Because on the blog post I've written it out every time, but it's quite hard to say constantly. Okay then. So this type of a dementia tends to occur in people that are in their 50s, and it is characterized as a general onset of personality changes, including inappropriate and impulsive behaviors. In addition, over time, these behaviors become more and more pronounced and clear to see. Then the cognitive changes with this type of dementia include memory, organizational skills, and language do actually develop and start to return, yet this is only after the behavioural changes. However, the early brain damage in behavioural variant frontotemporal dementia occurs in the brain regions that are part of the brain's emotional salient network, and this is a critical network because it involves regions such as the amygdala and the insular cortex, and both these are very, very important form of emotional regulation. An important wider forensic psychology point. Nonetheless, there is a critical point to all of this criminal behaviour, and of course there is a wider point that I always try to make with these podcast episodes. Because there are other conditions like bipolar disorder, sociopathy and alcohol abuse that can also lead to criminal behaviour. Therefore, when people are arrested and it is believed that they might have a mental health condition that impacted their criminality, it is important for them to get assessed by a healthcare professional so that we can fully understand what happened. Plus, I should also add here that it's important to see if they're actually lying, because of course sadly some people do use that defence when of course it's absolute rubbish because they don't, which is why assessments are so critical. As well as this is why different disciplines working together is so important. The law and psychology and general medicine have to work together if we are going to create a fairer, safer and better society for everyone, whether they have a condition or not. Conclusion. To be true, I really was putting off this podcast episode for quite a while, because I wasn't sure if I could create a long enough episode from it, but I'm so glad that I have actually done this episode now, because it's great to see how dementia can interact with our behaviour to cause our criminality. And this is what I love about focusing on a topic, because you will get to look at all the little nuances and how it impacts different fields from psychology. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and that you got something out of it. If you know someone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And definitely check out for Forensic Psychology collection, available in all the usual places. That book is just absolutely brilliant. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.